and welcome to Coffee with CiCi. I am your host, CiCi, a first-generation immigrant chasing their American dreams. So this will be actually our sixth episode. And first of all, to say thank you to our listeners for your participation, subscribing, commenting, and sharing your wonderful thoughts and thumbs ups like a beautiful heart. It truly shows that our guests that you are right here with us. And so together we can grow faster and greater. So as you know, that's each episode we dive into a personal experiences, personal growth, personal challenges, and those trophy moments that make life so fascinating. So by sharing these stories that we hope to inspire and empower each other to navigate our own journeys with more confidence and resilience. So today, actually, we have the extraordinary honor of hosting a truly remarkable guest. So he's a book writer, a professional coach, a dynamic radio and podcast host of Vision in Action, a retired high technology executive, and a former lieutenant in the U.S. Navy submarines. So he promotes personal growth and has even created a website to help people nurture their minds and develop their potentials. So he believes that everyone deserves to live in the life of their dreams with his strategic approach and time-tested solutions that he provides invaluable insights on achieving personal fulfillment and mastering life's objectives. So let's get ready to embrace this lucrative opportunity to explore and learn from a prosperous mind. So please join me to welcome the incredible new friend, James Boswell.
Hi, CiCi. Thank you for having me. A pleasure to be here.
Yeah, James, I'm thank you for joining us on a Saturday afternoon. So this is really a gracious of you, and Jim, that's when we first connected over the email, and you mentioned the possibility of hosting the radio shows on your channel, right? And
Right.
unfortunately, I wasn't able to participate at that time. In however that your generosities in honoring us with your time and accepting this invitation. So it has been a blessing for our show and our listeners. And I am so thrilled to start our conversations and explore more about you and your success journey.
Great, great. Looking forward to it.
That's amazing. And Jim, that's actually I've learned that you've worn like multiple hats and held various prestigious roles throughout your success journey. Am I right?
Yes, I've had work for multiple companies. I've had multiple different positions over the course of my career, and I've moved around throughout the United States to do that. So I traveled on behalf of that. It was a rewarding experience. And these days, I'm just trying to share that with people who are interested in this personal development challenge.
How fabulous is that? And then this is our first time of conversation. I did my diligence and my homework behind of it. So and I learned all of those prestigious roles that you held before. And then can I say that you are the architect of your own success?
Well, by and large, like everybody, we start off with very little knowledge as teenagers, and we grow into our lifestyle. Some more successfully than others, right? Because they internalize the lessons that are available to them and they start using them to great advantage. I was lucky because that's the way I approached growing up, getting a college degree, learning how to make money, learning how to synchronize my interests with the employment I was seeking, which is always much better than just what I call a paycheck job. And I had those too as a college student, like most people do. And I've been very fortunate. But as you also know, life has its speed bumps. Things happen to you, and you have to learn either by experience or by coaching or information that you can count on how to survive these upsets. You may have to move to succeed how you want to. You may want to postpone family for a while to get your feet planted. You may find that you'll have a financial reversal sometime in your life, but those are all recoverable. And so it's a process that you can start. And we tend to like to think that the teenage years is a good time to start focusing on the learning curve. And there's lessons to be learned there and to grow from, and they set a foundation for when you're, say, a more mature adult in mid-career. And the mid-career thing also gets you to the point where when you start thinking about retiring, you don't treat that as, oh, well, I'm just going to spend every day on the golf course. You actually look at what makes you happy and what you like to do, and you get to refocus on that outside of career. So it's kind of a cradle to grave approach that I take. And the reason I did this was to kind of give back to the public at large a lot of the tools, rules, and processes that I became acquainted with along the way. And so I've sort of collected these over the years, and I've used a bunch of them pretty successfully over 50 years. And so I'm a user like most of your audience. I came to it knowing nothing. At this stage, I know a lot more, not everything, nor am I an expert in everything. But I have taken it as a charter to codify who are the experts in every discipline that you might want to investigate. So for instance, if you need to learn a little economics, there's authoritative personnel and podcasts on my website that you can use for free. If you wanted to do a psychological profile and don't even understand what that is, there's a newsletter there that will walk you through how to do that. So there's all these bits and pieces, but it helps you learn how to do it as a young adult, a mature adult, and the challenges of retiring. So this is what I am trying to do, is kind of offer this body of knowledge to everyone that has an interest in it.
Wow, that's beautiful. I think it's a blessing to the world. In the gym, can you tell us a little bit more about your current focus? And then also that's what is the triggering moment and uh that's made you made the decision to launch this
Right,
idea. Thank
right.
you.
Well, I sort of got into semi-retirement. I was working and still kind of having more free time. And I was looking at the issue of, if you're self-actualized, that's great for yourself, but the greatest gift you can give others is the benefit of your wisdom, if you have any. And I felt it was incumbent upon me to offer back. I can't do it for my family. They're already grown and gone and moving ahead, but I could do it so that my niece and nephew could understand what I did and maybe use it, and everybody in the public domain would have access to it. So I did it this way. I started about 8 years ago, and I taught a class at a local junior college, and it was very well received. So we turned around and made that a workshop. And I came in contact with a lot of people, mostly of the retirement age bracket, that were looking how to redefine what they want to do with their retirement years. Subsequently, I found that for me to really do this, I needed to write a book. And this book takes a departure, like you'll find, let's take Grit by Angela Duckworth. It's teaching how to be perseverant in the face of good things and troubled issues. Well, that's one solution of many. And what I wanted to do was share the fact that, yes, she's in my bibliography. So if you want to learn about grit, you'll go to my bibliography, you'll read it, or you'll watch a podcast. But I wanted to show people that that's not the only discipline you need to master to have the life that you want to live. So you might need to learn about finances. I think you're in that arena. Personal finances, how to do a personal income statement. You might want to say, well, my gut tells me I like this. You might want to reconfirm what your gut is telling you by taking a couple of personality profiles that says, well, yeah, or no, it's a little different than what you're thinking. And it drives you to, this is what you like. This is the way you interact with the world and people. And these are the kinds of careers that are probably high on your list or should be. And that's an objective, factual solution as opposed to my gut. I've either confirmed my gut or have modified my feeling about it with an external tool. And so it informs you, it moves you from your upbringing, your acculturation, your exposure to duty, citizenship, all these other institutional things where people tell you what you should value, tell you what you should do. They don't know you, to be frank. So what this does is move you from where you have all these ideas and habits and thoughts and everything to, let's just leave those aside. Let's look for a factual basis for who I am, what I'm about, what I want to do with my life, and how do I then implement that idea. And I'm very big on fact. I don't offer a lot of motivational and inspirational thing other than say this talk, because I think it's my responsibility to offer factual-based solutions. So in the psychology arena, you'll have Angela Duckworth, you'll have, a Nobel Prize winning psychologist. You'll have authorities like that where you can trust what they say. You can trust that they tested these ideas. You can trust that when they recommend something to you, there's a lot of value there. And so they are not providing a lot of inspiration, but they are saying, okay, I have a solution. I've done my homework here. I'm articulating something that the public could also use. And so I'm doing the same thing, but I do it in a much broader brush. And the way to use the tools on lifelongfulfillment.com is to go there and just simply take a look at it. Look at the broad brush of everything that you might want to learn about or to try, and do that before engaging, say, a professional coach, or before making a critical college, major decision. Things like that, it can actually help you. Rather than jumping to, I need say a psychiatrist because I just think I do. I would rather understand all the tools that are available to me so that I make an informed decision about needing a psychiatrist or needing a financial guidance counselor or whatever it is I feel like I lack and need help to learn that isn't already on the website. So we carry this a step further. So I've done the book, I've done the website. Now we do Vision in Action Live. It's a podcast. It's hosted on YouTube. And we do that once a week. And we did initially training on the book material. So it's a cradle to grave, how to do your own personal development plans, create tactics, create goals that, are actionable and accountable. And so we moved from training, then we started showing what we call point solution experts. These are people that are, say, a psychiatrist would be an expert. I think we could all agree on that. So we show you how those fit in by bringing guests onto our show and letting them talk about, well, why would I need you? What do you do? What kind of certifications underlie and training underlie your expertise. And lately, we've also come to realize that not every authority agrees with the other authority in that same discipline. So we'll put some, say, we're going to have a podcast next week, in fact, on redefining divorce. And I have 3 divorce lawyers who are fed up with the system. And we're going to actually interview them about, well, how should we do this? Okay, because the traditional way is very upsetting. The only one that wins are the lawyers. And there's a better way to do it. And each of these people have an idea. So we're going to do it as a podcast panel because they may not necessarily agree, right? But we'll expose that to the public at large so that if that were to happen to them, not that it will, but if they have a different mentality about what they would want to do faced with that challenge. So there's about 42 podcasts there right now, and we do one a week. And we're looking at personality profiles. We're going to do divorce. We did an episode on cancer. We do episodes on coaches. I'm a certified life coach. We bring other life coaches on board and have them talk about what they help their clients with. And so that becomes a complete package that anybody can use. All of it's free except the book. And frankly, if you want the book, just email me. I'll send it to you for free.
Thank you so much, James, for taking us like a beautiful virtual tour of, of the lifelong fulfillment website. And also thank you for sharing that, the powerful, the philosophy behind of it. Yeah, really appreciate it. And in the meantime, that Jim, so would you like to tell us a little bit more about your military experiences as a lieutenant in the U.S. Navy submarine? I mean, what is that experience looks like? So tell us a little bit more.
Well, I came to the Navy as a result of running out of money trying to pursue a master's degree in industrial engineering. I basically was working, 30 hours a week or whatever, and I just couldn't make ends meet between that and scholarships and so on. So I started looking around for the best next alternative in terms of how can I learn new skills and access to education and valuable experience. And my dad had been both in the Navy and the Air Force, so I sort of knew and had a hunch that there might be a place for me there. Now I couldn't pilot the attack aircraft because I'm kind of not so good on the eyes. But I did talk to the Air Force and then I talked to the Navy, and they decided, the Navy did, and they talked to me about nuclear power submarines at the time. And this was circa 1974, shall we say?
1974.
Yeah. So I said, yes, I'd like that. I'd very much like to do that. I'd like to go. There's a lot of schooling involved, so it's
Right.
practical and hands-on. And so I went into it and I initially became a weapons officer and then graduated to be an engineering officer. And the first ship I was on was a nuclear powered fleet ballistic missile submarine. So they carry nuclear missiles to protect the United States from other countries, their own arsenals. So I, started as a guy who didn't know much about the Navy,
Right.
learned a lot. I got submarine qualified, so I was driving the ship, telling people what to do. I was an officer of the deck. I was a nuclear weapons officer. And all of these are certifications because that's the way the Navy works. And I did that for about 3 to 4 years.
And
And I worked out of Rota, Spain. I worked out of Charleston, South Carolina,
right.
out of San Diego, Bremerton, Washington, so pretty much everywhere.
That's wonderful. And Jim, that's this role that I learned, it requires extensive trainings, right? And then technical expertise, and also that's the ability to make a critical uh, decisions in a high pressure situations, right?
Yes.
So, in the could you share an example or paint us a picture, like in a particular, like say, intense moment that you experienced and how you managed to overcome it?
Right, right. Um, I think in the Navy, one of our most interesting ones was my last boat was a World War II vintage diesel submarine. And we were based out of Bremerton, Washington. And we had finished what's called a refit. That's where you do maintenance like you do on a car and things like that. So we
Right.
did, it was in dry dock there for about 6 months. So I joined it in dry dock and then we took it out for sea trials. And we had some new people on board, including me, but I had already been on a submarine for about 2.5 years anyway. So we went out into the Straits of San Juan de Fuca and into the, Western Pacific there, and did sea trials where you go up, you go down, you submerge, you run all your equipment, you make sure everything works. Well, one time when we were submerged, it turns out that one of the people who was junior and had just joined the ship didn't fully close what's called a flooding valve. In other words, you bring seawater in to increase your weight and you go deeper, right? Well,
Right.
if you don't close that valve, it'll leak in, and ultimately you're going to wind up having trouble keeping elevation in the water and you start sinking. Well, we had that happen. And so, yeah, uh, we called for what's called an emergency blow, which is air goes into the tanks, it throws out water, and you come up very quickly to the surface. So that will get your adrenaline running for sure. And it's a little scary, but we were doing what we were taught to do. You practice these things. We actually had done those as a trial, but this was actually a real situation where something was wrong and we reacted to it in normal fashion. But everybody was ready for a drink when we got back to port.
Right. And how many people were there in on that ship?
There were 85.
Wow. And then you were the decision maker. And is that right? Am I hearing that correctly?
Uh, I was at the con when it happened, yes. So, I plus the captain made the decision, yes.
Right. And then so Jim, that's how long does it take you to arrive the decision? And is it a few seconds or is it like a minute? What's the difference in time wise?
Probably about 20 to 30 seconds.
20 to 30 seconds you have to make the decision. And
Yes.
then if you didn't make that decision at that time at that moment, what will happen?
Well, the submarine, if left to its own devices that way, would actually settle on the bottom of the seabed, right?
Right.
And then you'd have to find a way to get back off the seabed, which is you do a slower blow as opposed to an emergency blow, and then you resurface again. Um, so it wouldn't have been catastrophic, but
Oh,
it's not something anybody would want to do.
right, right. Wow. That's intense. That's pretty intense. Within you have to arrive the decision in a 20 to 30 seconds. Wow, that's intense.
Yeah, it's also something that young people are really good at. The older you get, the longer you tend to want to deliberate and procrastinate and think it through. And so it's a young person's game, truly.
So, did I hear this correctly, Jim? That's so in a like a daily life for submarines, that when in a daily practice, then it seems like everybody have to arrive the decision counting in seconds, not a minute, right?
Well,
Um, is that
we
right?
we do train everybody. In other words, we do what are called evolutions, and it's like doing something
Right.
with the ship and with everybody on the ship doing their part, because there's many things that have to happen uh, at the same time or coincident to other things happening for the ship to operate correctly. So yes, we run people through multiple times. We drill, we train, so that you've already sort of made the decision because you know what you're going to do. So it
Right.
takes less time to say, I don't know what to do. Well, you do. It's just you got to say, do this, do that, and act accordingly. So the military is really good at that. They've been doing it for hundreds of years,
Right.
and they understand the human psyche and how to train for best results. So it does work.
That's fascinating. And back then, Jim, that's I learned you stay in the military for about 6 years.
Right.
Am I right? Yeah.
Yes.
And so with so many choices available within that military for you, and why did you choose to pivot to IT industry and serving as an executive?
I found that the military of my generation uh, really was on its own agenda, and that was they wanted people to stay. And a normal career is about 20 years, but of that 20 years, you'll probably spend about 14 to 15 of those years at sea. Okay. That precludes having a normal home life, a normal family life, a lot of things that, not everybody wants, but some people do want. And my feeling was also that it truncated my access to continued education.
Right.
And I felt like if I stayed in, I would be doing a much more sea duty. Yes, I would have an opportunity to go to grad school with the Navy, but that was further down the road. So I felt like after 6 years, we had each done equally well for each other. They got a lot of value out of me. I got a lot of value out of them. And
Right.
I decided that it was time to go back, translate my military experience into civilian experience by getting a master's degree and then getting myself recruited. And I've always liked science and technology. So I wound up, coming through the back door into Silicon Valley by operating with HP in Boise, Idaho for about 2 years. So it was a way to change that, gain more education, and put myself on a different career track. And that career track satisfied the things I like to do, the kind of people I like to work with. The industry was very much in its infancy, so it was ripe for talent like mine to be promotable and to do more different things. So I found that very attractive. I also realized that I'm more of a troubleshooter. I was never a person who was looking for a 30-year career and a gold watch. I like to encounter development opportunities. I like to grow business. I like to solve problems. And in doing so, you kind of work yourself out of a job. So you sort of have to have the next job in mind or a promotion in mind once you're done with your primary job of the moment. So I liked it. I got adjusted to it. And those people early in Silicon Valley days, which was semiconductors for me, invested in their people a lot of people training, personnel training. They hired experts to come in and teach us techniques and ways to think that some of us had, some of us didn't have, but they all added to our effectiveness in doing whatever we were doing. So I managed large accounts. I managed like Digital Equipment Corporation. I managed Apple. I managed AT&T, Hewlett Packard Worldwide, delivering this, that, and the other sort of electronics, maybe a semiconductor, maybe a liquid crystal display for a portable computer. It really didn't matter that much, but I was helping them be successful with our products. And that's very much the case in technology is when you decide to use somebody's product in your product, you're betting your career, your product and your business on that supplier doing all the right things. And I was that supplier. So it's a very different relationship. And it was fun. It was really great. We were involved in wonderful products that hit the market, leading up to and including the cell phone, the internet as we know it today, fiber optics, cell towers, you name it. Our products went into all of those. So the things we take for granted today were the things that I helped other companies, uh, you know, uh, get their products to market and supply the right devices to make them effective. It was great fun.
It's amazing that it sounded like that you are part of that, the pioneer uh of that's the new technology era. Did I hear that correctly? Like,
A little bit. I
right?
mean, to give you an idea, in my business, there was a guy named Jerry Sanders who ran Advanced Micro Devices over in Sunnyvale, California. And Jerry is renowned for being the salesperson, but he was the CEO and president. And he brought a very distinct flavor to the company. And so he was all about how do we make the product better, more dependable, and have a preference by customers in the way we do business and the business we sell, right? Great guy. And very insightful about, entrepreneurship. There's another guy that you probably know. You ever heard of Jensen Wang at NVIDIA?
Yes.
Okay. Jensen taught me how to do application specific design at let's see, what was it? In application specific designs, which is a semiconductor. He taught me in a regular scheduled class, how to do it. And this was when he was young, way young. And I was a little older, maybe a decade or so, but we had a great time. I learned a lot. And now look what he's doing. And I'm so proud of him. It's really fabulous.
It's fabulous. And so beside of all of this, tenacities, responsibilities you've been held, and and we are curious that what is the fun fact about you that you haven't reviewed on other platform yet?
Um, I like to say that I'm a charter member of the Lunatic Fringe. So let me try and explain that. Most people are familiar or become familiar with the normal curve. Uh, Population studies typically do that. If you look at salaries and things like that, you can have a normal curve and everything. And what I find is that the general opinions or ideas that are popular in the public, I rarely know them nor think that way. So I'm out on the far fringe, beyond the 99th percentile, because I think differently about things.
Right.
And I'm not an engineer's engineer. Like I couldn't stomach the idea of working in a lab. It's just too slow, too detailed, and it's tedious. And I'm a little bit more of a big picture guy than tedious. And so I knew that about myself. So I didn't try and put myself into those positions. But I was really happy about understanding what was happening in the lab, the products we were designing, and how that product could translate into somebody else's device, like say an Apple portable computer. And I enjoyed that immensely because I was helping them be successful. And by doing that, we were successful in tandem. Uh, very enjoyable. I felt like we were adding huge value at that point to the world at large and the United States economy, certainly. Because I worked at Advanced Micro Devices, which most people know that besides Intel, they were the CPU of choice back in the time. I worked for an application specific outfit that was great. And I worked for a number of memory companies and so on in semiconductors. And then that moved into software eventually, and then, consulting for small entrepreneurial businesses. So building that foundation as I did allowed me to go out and do these other things in the way I like to do it. So yeah, I'm kind of on the lunatic fringe. I'm not your normal guy, your normal, I don't have family, so I'm not a granddad. I don't have children, but I do work with a lot of people to try and help them be successful in their efforts.
Fascinating. And Jim, that's and I noticed that, you are calm and clear and confident demeanor. So were you always like this, or were you born like this?
My gosh, no, I was not. I was a very anxious 18-year-old when I went away to college. I was a late bloomer. I could not decide in college what career I wanted to pursue. So that's one reason I went in the Navy, was because it would help give me time and allow me the resources to be clearer about what kind of career I wanted. Uh, but no, I had trepidations about, you know, things I didn't understand. I had the issue of my gut or my intuition might have been telling me something, and I learned sometimes to trust it, but sometimes not to it, and to verify it with another resource. So I have had the same problems everyone faces in terms of being unschooled, uh, not ready for prime time, and public speaking being a part of that. When I got into the main part of my career, I did a lot more public speaking. I went to trade shows. I did demonstrations. I talked to clients. I was dealing with directors and vice presidents and the like, and sometimes even the founders of a startup company. And it became incumbent upon me to know what I knew really well and understand how that value was of value to the client I was talking to, and to be confident enough to sit there and say, okay, well, the client wants this, and to be able to commit that with some confidence that we would do exactly that, and that the client would be successful, and we, as a consequence, would also be successful. So it's an acquired talent. You might say, well, Jim, you seem like an extrovert. In point of fact, I'm not. I'm an introvert, but
You're an introvert.
I have taught myself to be an extrovert over time.
And overtime is how long is the overtime?
Um, it probably took about 10 years,
10 years, decade.
probably from about 25 to 35, somewhere in there.
You master it. You master it. Mm. In the another beautiful concept that you mentioned on your website of lifelongfulfillment.com, and you mentioned that everyone deserves the highest level of personal fulfillment and the opportunity to live the life of their dreams.
Right,
Um, and fulfillment is indeed a beautiful concept. It's a beautiful word. So, however, I noticed that each person has their own unique definition of what does the fulfillment means to them, right?
right,
Um, so given that you wrote a book, it's called a Lifelong Fulfillment, and I am so intrigued that what are your perspectives on fulfillment? And how does that serving the highest good of Jim?
right. Okay. Well, I want to digress to introduce a concept, and it's in the psychology arena, and it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, excuse me. And it is basically a pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid are things like, I need food, I need shelter, I need water, and that sort of thing. The next level up is, I need companionship, I need to care about somebody and be cared about, right? So that's kind of a little bit more fulfilling. Then you get into the middle section where it's, I'd really like to be in control of my life. I don't
Right.
I don't want my parents to tell me what to do. I don't want my government to tell me what to do. I want to find the real me, and then I want to decide what I want to do, and then decide how to do that, and then go do it, right?
Right.
And in the process of doing that, I'm going to need to acquire certain things or consult with people or watch a podcast like this to be able to do that. So the whole thing about fulfillment is you put yourself in control, right? You put yourself in control in preference to everyone and everything else. Now, I'm not saying that that's a license to be difficult, nor hard to deal with, nor unfeeling to those that you care about. Obviously, I may not take my guidance from my parents, but I love them for what they did for me. I might be married. I still need to listen to my own self about what's important for me. But part of that is my relationship with my wife, right?
Right.
So it's not exclusively selfish in all domains, no, but it's a measured approach to how do I now define that? At the very peak of
Right.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is, well, you started out, you learned things, then you satisfied the basic biological and sociological needs, and now you're self-directing your life. And what you're getting at the highest level now is you have a lot of history. You've done it so many times. It's a habit, it's ingrained, and you're very clear about, I'm this guy, this is what I like, this is what I'm gonna do, da, da, da. And you're confident in that. And it's hugely uh it's emotionally and intellectually fulfilling to have that much control that you feel like you can set goals, meet them, and you're the master of your best life, so to speak. It's a process. You have to learn it. And you don't get there at age 18. I'm sorry to say, you have agendas as a youth, a young adult that are different than a mid-career adult, very different. And you will change, you'll get there, but building these foundations at different levels with specific information allows you to do just what I've talked about.
Wow, that's extraordinary. And since you mentioned about, young like what's it, teenagers or adults. So then
Right.
I learned that on your website, and you mentioned about point solutions for young and point solutions for adults.
Yeah,
And can you tell us a little bit more about your vision and philosophy behind these concepts?
sure. Well, if we look at young adults, right? And I'm being advised these days by educational professionals that you need to think of a young adult as about 15 or 16 years old, because coming up out of high school and graduating from there becomes the decision of, do I go to tech school? Do I take time off? Do I go to college? Do I know myself well enough to spend a lot of money and effort on something it's just a gut feeling? Okay. And here's the thing is, youth, when you're young, that's the time when you start moving from the institutional ideas, the duty ideas, the things you've grown up with and been coached on, to finally understanding, well, if we set that aside, what about me, right? Who am I in this? And some of it may be valid, but until you know who you are, then you really are going to struggle because you're trying to satisfy other people's agendas. And I always had myself personally an issue with that. It was like, no, I want to figure this out, and I want it to be not selfishly, but fulfilling on the fulfillment side
Right,
about me. And
right,
yeah, maybe I did do some duty with the Navy, that's fine. But it was a shared responsibility. We both won through me being there,
right,
and I won from leaving. They got what they needed from me. So, nobody gets hurt that way either. Um, So now I'm advised that, okay, let's say I'm 17. I'm thinking about college. We're having the conversation with the parents. We're having a conversation with a coach who tells you how to get the education you need, but in better economic circumstances. In other words, cheaper tuition, maybe state school versus an Ivy League, whatever
Right.
decision process. The point is, how can you make that decision if you don't know who you are and what you want? So I'm trying to convince folks that you need to take some personality profiles when you're between 16 and 18 to inform your career idea. Okay. And all you're doing is setting all your thoughts aside and saying, in this personality profile, I'm going to take this test, answer these questions, and it's only going to be about me. I'm not thinking about mom, dad. I'm not thinking about money. I'm not thinking about anything, but who am I? And out of that comes a characterized version of you. And you can read it. There's a paragraph that says, well, da 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 and da 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 da, and you react this way and you think this way. And oddly enough, they're very proficient at describing who you are, how you think, what you value. Then if you take more than one personality profile, which we recommend at Lifelong Fulfillment, then you get a crosscut and you can build some confidence that one test doesn't, is really telling you the truth. Or if you have some disagreement with the test results, you got another set of test results to kind of rationalize that. So we recommend at least two. And there's a third test that's about how you deal with people, your introversion, your extroversion, and how you work best with your fellow human. Those arm a student to take the personality profile, and there's a direct correlation between that and career choices. And it's already mapped out where, say I'm in Myers-Briggs, an INTJ, and
Right.
we'll pass trying to do the details on that. I can take the INTJ and take it to another test, and it will say, most INTJs like these kinds of career paths. He wants to be a designer, or he wants to be an organizer, or he wants to be maybe an administration. Okay. That helps me as an 18-year-old be much better tuned up on what college to go to, what majors to be looking at, what are the prerequisites that I'm going to have to do. I might have to do math, and I'm not a math whiz, right?
Right.
So it helps you early on to spend important resources and time, your parents' money, your scholarship, your time and attention for probably 4 years to say, well, I'm going to get the maximum return out of that because I'm much surer about who I am than just what my gut told me before. So that's why it's important and young. The other side of being young, and I'm not going to pick on youth, but what I'm going to say is, as human beings, at every point in our life, there's things we don't know that we don't know. In
Exactly.
other words, we just don't know what we need. And so in the youth arena, the point solutions there are about building this base of knowledge that says, I can now make good decisions. I can make good economic decisions. I can recognize when something I'm doing is not returning the same psychic income, monetary income, or whatever result you're looking for that I expected. In fact, it's plateaued or maybe it's declining, and it's time to do something different. So, you get those kinds of trainings early on, and for youth especially, that's what it's about. It's about trying things, reading, watching podcasts, getting a sense of, okay, I know my personality type. I know I'm interested in this. Now, how do we fuel that? What do I need in that whole set of expert solutions to make me successful? Because if you don't do that, you make decisions that take you down a blind alley, you waste money, you waste time, and you don't build a foundation for the rest of your life. So we're trying to solve two problems: help you understand who you are as much as possible and what that means in terms of what you might like to do. And then the other is to get you started on continuous education for the rest of your life, because as a youth, it's very important.
Mm, that is fascinating. And Jim, can you give us a little bit like advice on what are the how to say, what are the great personality profiles? For example, because there are so many of the personality profiles out there on the market. What are the ones that kind of a more reliable?
Right. Uh, in the book, I focus primarily on Myers-Briggs, which is a Jungian derivative, and it was very popular during the mid-40s, and it's widely understood. People think it's a little intellectual, shall we say,
Right,
but my understanding is it's still being used. It is statistically significant. In other words, it's been tested against statistics for its efficiency in describing, who you might want to be or who you really think you are. And oh, by the way, what kind of careers might fit. So Myers-Briggs, I think, is a important one. Since the year 2000, there is a new one called positive psychology.
right,
Positive psychology looks at about 24 characteristics about yourself and tells you how you rate in every one of those. Unfortunately, with 24 things, it doesn't distill it down quite as much, but it does provide some interesting counterpoints to Myers-Briggs so that you can look for similarities about the two saying the same thing. If that's the case, you can pretty well trust it. If you have one that says one thing about an idea or a characteristic and the other says exactly the opposite, well, then you can't really trust it, right?
right,
So, and then there's one called DISC, and I'm abbreviating it, but DISC is one we recommend too. And that's your communication style, how you view yourself, your neighbor, your parents, how you deal with folks as groups and as individuals. And that's really important to understand. If you're a retiring kind of introvert, that's gonna show on this DISC wheel. And it's gonna tell you, well, you don't want to be the CEO of a company because
right,
your mental objectives, the way you deal with the world, don't satisfy the need at the CEO level, right? But you might want to be a researcher inside that same company, right? Where
right,
it's intensely focused, it's intensely personal. It's not so much dealing with the public. It's dealing with workmates and, and your own responsibilities. So those are three that we like: Myers-Briggs, positive psychology, and DISC. Now, there's a whole number of others. There's SPF 16, there's the Enneagram, there's a number of others that you can also do. And I would never say don't do them, but I would say, two or three is enough probably. And maybe later on, a few years down the road, you might take the others, just as a refresh, because you might have not had a clear head when you took the test, say, for Myers-Briggs. And so the results might be mostly right, but they might not be exactly right because you were thinking about something else, right? You were
right,
distracted. You were responding to some institutional standard when I'm really asking you about you. So you answered one question with another answer. So I would never say don't do that. You can always do better. And most of these tests are online and they're mostly free. So there's no point in having to spend a ton of money on any of it. And in fact, we provide a reference on lifelongfulfillment.com where you can go to those and do them. In fact, the book, even has a hot link directly to those services. Now, they are collecting your data, but it's anonymous. So, very little harm done for having taken a Myers-Briggs test, but you become one of millions, right? To again, still certify that Myers-Briggs is a very definitive product. So I would say those three would help you. The other thing is looking at your risk profile. Life is all about risk and risk reward scenarios, if you really think about it. In business, everybody understands that because
Right.
everything you're doing is at
Right.
risk. But you also have a personal risk equation. So if I'm really not into risk, well, then I don't want to go to Silicon Valley and try something. I don't want to become a startup guy.
Exactly.
Exactly. If I'm a high risk person, I'm very confident. I'm not worried about the money. You know, I have a really steady personality. Then maybe I do want to be in Silicon Valley. Maybe I do want to be an entrepreneur and start my own company. You know, if most of us, however, fall in the in-between areas where it's not quite so clear. And so every opportunity that comes your way, whether it's going to college, whether it's your first job, whether it's getting married, whether it's making a move, are decisions that are in the middle, right? You think, well, actually, in the book, we try and help people understand how do I assess my risk for a certain action I want to take? And then to decide, no, that's too much over here, but I could do this instead. I'm much more comfortable here. And so that's the other part you need to know about yourself, because it's really easy to let Myers-Briggs tell you one thing, but if you're risk averse, there's things in Myers-Briggs that you are precluded from doing. If you are of medium risk and high risk, well, then pretty much, you know, everything's possible. So those really are the tool sets starting out young that we think are pretty important for people to have as soon as they can get them.
That's fabulous. I mean those three you mentioned, I think I have done the DSS, DISC, right?
Right,
That's a very insightful, actually quite accurate to my situation. Yeah.
right.
So what do you think about the STAR? That do you recommend that?
I think it's okay. I don't have as much experience with it, so I wouldn't want to say anything negative about it. But I think if a person wants to take that in lieu of either one of the others or in addition to, that's perfectly fine.
They're kind of like you in your perspective, they're kind of like in complementing each other, kind of bring
Exactly.
the equal result. Is that right?
Exactly. They complement each other and they prevent, if there's some disconnect between the results, it at least lets you look at that real hard to decide yourself, okay, in that disconnect, I think I'm this, right? And
Right.
this test tells me that, but that one didn't, so I'm gonna go with what I think, right?
Exactly. Exactly. And then so the following question is Jim, that since like you have a lot of expertise in this area. Well, I mean I just represent our listeners to ask this question. So you know factual is factual. It's fabulous. But in the meantime, as a human being, like when we make decisions, we also have another small portion of ourselves, like the emotional part, right? What we say is more like the gut. So let's say that for unexperienced young adults, right? They're still exploring the world. And so the results that they generated from those profiles and to your prospect, your perspective, like what's the percentage that they should take into the decision process? What percentage you think is justified?
You mean the emotional quotient of it as opposed to the academic?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Well, we're all emotional creatures, okay,
Right.
me included. We have different commitments to our emotions from person to person. So it's, again, this whole process is very individually oriented. There's
Exactly.
no way for me to tell anybody exactly what they should do. It's impossible. I can only give you tools and things to select from for you to decide. So with that said, emotion certainly figures in everything you do. One of the things about emotions is we grow up as emotional creatures before we start growing our knowledge base.
Jim, I was just fascinating about that moment.
Yeah.
I look forward. So I think we lost you just a few seconds ago when you talk about the emotional part.
Okay, so I'll backtrack a little bit. So everybody has emotions, okay?
Jim,
Some people have an emotional content in their lives that where it figures pretty large. Some have less commitment to it. And some of the stereotyping we have, although I hate stereotyping in general, is that, you know, an engineer with a slide rule or a calculator or a PC or a computer behind him is a fact-oriented kind of activity. He's a fact-based kind of person. Doesn't mean he doesn't feel, but it's probably not his primary response, right? A person, say, who is in the entertainment industry, on the other hand, probably lives and breathes for the psychic income, the emotional reaction. And so their forte, they're more driven probably, and I'm just volunteering this, by that emotional quotient than, say, that engineer. And
oh,
so everybody's different.
oh,
Uh, I
wow.
personally am less emotional. I mean, I was more emotional younger. I've learned to be less emotional because the facts inform my decisions better and I get better results. I don't have to have high high peaks and low valleys and get depressed all the time simply because I made a bad decision, because the factual portion of it is helping me make good decisions that I can be happy with. And happiness is an emotion, right?
Right. Exactly. Well, I think this is uh, the best explanation that I ever heard. Thank you. Uh, I
Sure.
hope, yeah, I hope that's the listeners will benefits. I'm sure yeah, they find it beneficial. So then, also that we are curious that, you know, where you like to take the lifelong fulfillment website, where you like to take it. What is your goal?
Well, right now, I'm trying to proliferate attention to the website. That's part of the reason for Vision in Action Live, the podcast. I'm working with other people in the personal development space so that it's more of a teamwork approach where if they have a particular point solution, say as a coach, well, I want them to feel free to use all the material on the website to as an adjunct to their coaching activity. Okay. There's also the difference in that if you understand what coaches do, they use the Socratic question and answer method. So they're not really introducing new information to the client. They're actually letting the client resolve in his or her own mind about how they want to resolve whatever their issue is. So by adding the information I have, they can point to it with their client and say, okay, you know, Jim here has collected a bunch of authoritative stuff. If you want to learn about this, why don't you read this book or watch this podcast before our next meeting? So it gives other people the chance to operate with more information, not less, okay? Or to stop being isolated by this is what I do and I can't add anything more to it. That's simply not true. So the end result is the person who needs the help or is looking for better information gets a combination of solutions presented to them, and they're more likely to get what they need in that kind of scenario.
Marvelous. And Jim, that if we were have the opportunity to reflect what happens in 2024 and just for your a lifelong fulfillment website, that's I mean, what has been the thing that blocked you last year the most, uh and what is the thing that's still hard for you to break through, and sometimes that you forgot, then you have to be reminded in a painful lesson.
Yeah. Yeah, painful lessons. Well, I did not come to digital social media with a lot of skill sets. I actually have an old friend who's been doing it for 15 years. And so I connected with him and I work with him because he is an expert at it.
Right.
And it has been frustrating at time because the regular expectations others have of social media don't always lend them to me communicating, the information I have to give, the fact that it's out there and available, it's free, and that it really has the potential to help everyone in a very significant fashion. Um, and so I continue to come back to my friend and say, okay, well, this doesn't seem to be working. How do I improve that? And I'm
Right.
not normally the guy on the learning curve, as you might guess, but this time I really am. So I've had to reformat my thinking is, you need to use the expertise that's available with your friend to help, you be more effective. And it works. Sometimes it doesn't work as much as I'd like, but I'm okay with that, you know.
Marvelous. And Jim, that you were born and raised in America, and as you know, that's our podcast have listeners from about 30 countries across the world,
Right.
and we are fascinating to learn about your perspective about the American dream. And so, what does the American dreams means to you?
Well, as a youth of the male persuasion, I had, information from my dad and my mother and so on like that, and, school about what that American dream was. I found that, remember I said I was on the lunatic fringe, right?
Exactly.
I found out very quickly that their definition and my definition of the American dream were quite different. And so what I like to equate it to is the thing about America is the freedoms that we enjoy. Now, admittedly, it's changed in the last 40 to 50 years. It'll change in the next 40 to 50. But the point being is self-fulfillment happens better in that kind of environment where you're free to do what you want to and what you need to, as opposed to where you are, doing what you do at the behest of, somebody telling you what is right. Uh, so I don't beat the drum about patriotism, even though I was in the military. I do not, my niece and nephew asked me, should we join the military for the same reason you did? And I said, no,
No,
no. So I don't see it as a national identity. I see it as the freedom to pursue your own fulfillment in an environment that is better than maybe most other places. And it's not perfect. It probably never will be, but it's a matter of degree, right? And I've traveled, I used to do all of Europe. I used to do Asia Pacific. I've been to India, I've dealt with, people who have immigrated here, of all kinds of nationalities. So that's always been my perspective is they get to enjoy the same thing I do because they're here, right? And I
exactly.
know that to be true the world over, but we're working on that.
Exactly. Exactly. We're working on it. Um, and Jim, that you probably heard about it. I mean, this is statistics somewhere. And then they say that about 96% of the business fail within 10 years. But here's what most people don't realize is because of failure doesn't always mean shutting down, right? Sometimes it looks like being stuck, working harder every year and grinding for clients and drowning in the admin's work and but still seeing the freedom or time that you imagined when you started your still not seeing the freedom or time that you imagined when you started your practice, right? And then people say that the truth is it's not about lacking of talent or not lacking of intelligence or efforts we're holding you back, but it's the system that we are using, or well, more accurately, they say that it's the one you don't have. So in this applies to individuals and businesses. I'm intrigued to to learn what are your perspectives, or what are your strategies that you use for personal growth, or for a personal development, and can you share a little bit more on that?
Sure, sure. Well, let me at the outset say that, no matter what you do, you will make an error. You will, you'll have an idea, you'll try it, it doesn't work. That's expected. That's the human learning curve as much as reading a book or watching a podcast.
True.
So we have to get out of the blame game about, I did something, it didn't work. Because by doing something, you now get to learn from that experience. You learn for the next time that, hey, there's certain things here I'll never repeat, but there was a good thing came out of this, and maybe I want to pursue that. So there's no fault in having a problem and resolving it. It pays to be kind of honest with yourself and the people around you when you do, and just say, hey, I'm sorry, I made a mistake. Sorry if it hurt you, but I'm moving on. So it's a part of a life process that you need to get comfortable with. You mentioned a couple of other things there. One that struck me that I think is a real imperative for people is there's so much white noise in the world now. White noise is a distraction from your ability to focus, right? And so one of the things you have to come to grips with is, how do I stay focused? And in the book and the website, we try and talk about this. We use some math principles to help define what that is, so that you're always attuned to, is what I'm doing delivering the progress I expected? Or has the situation changed and therefore my progress is stalled? What do I need to do about it? And follow through with that. So it helps you stay focused day in, day out, month to month, year to year. The other thing to mention is we all have a problem here. We have this huge, explosive, exponential growth in information. We build server farms, right, to house all that information. We put browsers and algorithms in front of that so that we can quiz the information that's there. But again, we don't know the depth and breadth of all that information.
Exactly.
Now we're talking about putting AI in there, which is one level above algorithms and browsers and so forth. And we're still doing the same thing. The problem is we are creating a situation where we have less and less control over the information that's delivered to us and understanding the validity of that information. In other words, if I go to find out something and it's something that's a research subject and there's a PhD and he wrote a paper and it's, it passes the makes sense test, it's factual, then I feel much better than someone who just has an opinion that is not based in fact. And when we get into this information thing, where we're putting information in server farms, some of it is not factual. Some of it is opinion. Some of it's derived information. We need to know what that is. So we have a problem in that we think at a slower rate in our minds. These machines think, in split seconds, nanoseconds and below, picoseconds, whatever you want to call it. And so that's great because you need that speed to manage the vast majority of information. But we, human beings, we have a disconnect. We can't absorb that information that fast. So it's something to be aware of as somebody gets schooled and invests their life into, certain disciplines, careers, whatever, that this is actually going on behind the scenes. So that's why I emphasize so much is You need authoritative sources here so that you can be confident that what you're doing has already been tried and it's odds on favorite that it'll do the same, produce results for you.
That is fabulous. And Jim, that's, we've been talked about your success journey that, have been in the military space and you successful, and then you pivoted to the IT industry and you were successful. And now that you're pivoting to another space, that it seems like you are just pushing forward and making changes, like we are curious that what inspires you to keep pushing forward even when things getting tough.
Well, I've always been interested, say, if I worked in a business, let's say when I worked at Advanced Market Devices, I was always interested in how the company did as a whole, in addition to my job, right? And a lot of people, they're happy with just knowing about their job. I never had that. I was always looking at the company. Are we doing well? Is there something more I could do? How are we doing against competitors, things like that. And I've always had that regardless of what company I work for. And I always held myself individually responsible to do the best at a company level as well as at my own individual work. Because their success was my success. We were tied together. We were a team, so to speak. And they didn't invite me to do it. I just volunteered. I did this thing. It's kind of a habit I have. It has served me well because I could move to other companies and understand at a corporate level what the issues were, as well as what's the tactical at the business level to deliver the results they want, right? And I might be that guy at the business level delivering the results, but I wanted to know, well, how's that going to play in the marketplace, right? What's that going to do for us? These days, this is probably my last change because this is not a career. It's a little bit of a passion, yes, but it's going to have a life of its own. It's
Right.
there for the duration. I can no longer push people to use it. I can only invite them, and that's what I do is I invite them. I had much stronger ability to affect results when I was a career executive, right? But in this particular instance, I'm inviting people to, avail themselves of resources. And even though it's free, I wouldn't want them to confuse free with not having great worth. It really does. And I think it's a unique message, but it's going to take time to get some traction. That's very clear.
It's a blessing to the world. And I love I think I spent a few hours was on your website and I still wanted to go back because there are some valuable insights, valuable knowledge, nuggets, wisdoms was there. Yeah, I think for people who are drowning and then they are eager to grow their mind, nurturing their mental gardens. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a beautiful place to go. That's a beautiful place to go. And then, of course, in the end, that we will help the listeners, to notice that the website, the correct website, we'll put in on our screen and just make it easier to access. And the another questions we have, Jim, is what are your role models, and how have they influenced your journey?
Say this again now.
Like, who are your role models and
Oh,
how
my
have
models.
they influenced your journey?
Um, well, Jerry Sanders was clearly one. He was the
Right?
head of AMD for a while, and I liked Jerry. I'll tell you a brief story about Jerry. Jerry had us in Hawaii at a sales conference, and he was talking to sales and marketing people primarily, and some of the operations people. And he stood on the stage and he had a box of gold watches.
A
And
box of a gold watch.
of gold watches. Now, in the old days, you did your 30 years, you retired, you got to go watch, right?
Right.
Jerry's message was, if you think working for AMD is about a 30-year career and a gold watch, well, come right up here. I'm going to put these on the stage. You come grab yours now. And,
Wow.
and nobody got up to get it because the whole point was, this is not a 40-hour-a-week job. This is an entrepreneurship. You're an entrepreneur. I'm an entrepreneur. We're doing it together, right? If you
Right.
think differently, you need to realign your thinking or take a watch and go find another job. That was
Wow.
incredibly powerful.
So
Uh,
how many people were in the room
Hundreds.
and nobody
Hey,
got to the stage?
no, 300 to 400 people easily.
Wow.
And
Wow.
I was very impressed with his audacity, but I was also very impressed with his message
Right.
because I kind of think that way also. I I like thoughtful people who are good at presenting good information. I like people who are tolerant. I have a real problem with people that are judgmental. I like people who bring new ideas to the table. I like new ideas, always have. Um, and I like people that are willing to work at their own lives, right? The people that say or are inclined to say, I just want to be entertained for life, you have a right to do that in the US. No, no question about it. But I find it kind of wasteful that their human potential is left to being entertained as opposed to doing something for themselves. Um, so it inspires me to see people like you out here on the bleeding edge, doing something different and
Thank
taking
you.
control. That's very impressive. Thanks.
Thank you, Jim. And then, Jim, actually, we have a couple more questions. I'm sorry, it's how is your time. We just really enjoyed, I mean, learning from you. How's your time look like?
I can give it another 10 minutes if you like.
10
Yeah.
minutes. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate it. So another like a beautiful concept that you mentioned on the website is critical thinking. Um, and as a young adults, that's shaping critical thinking and building that's the correct infrastructure is very important. And also according to, I mean, your success journey and your experiences, would you like to share a little bit more about that critical thinking? How can you build a it when working for you?
Right. Right. Well, let's pick a bugaboo that everybody has to deal with. That is, we have to finance ourselves, right?
Right.
So some of us are born with money, some of us have to work for it, and so on and so forth. So how you deal with money is always going to be a large part of your life. If you want to treat that as a burden as opposed to an opportunity, it's entirely your choice. I, for instance, used my opportunity to get close to brokers when I was in Silicon Valley, when I was at AMD, and I had stock and I bought stock and all this other stuff. I learned by practicing and their coaching about that part of the financial equation. I've been doing my own taxes for 30 years. Why? Because I thought it was important. I learned to do it. I understand it. And it's just simpler for me to do it myself. So these are fear points where other people might not want to do that. And I understand that. But the more I hold myself responsible in the disciplines like economics, I read a lot of physics, believe it or not. I have a little bit of biology in my background. But I'm an investor. I take care of my money, I take care of my taxes. I psychologically know who I am really, really well at this point, both by testing and doing the practice of living the dream, so to speak, living my vision. And it either says, okay, well, you're doing good, or you missed that this time, but or that was a total failure. I get that up here. And at this stage, That's the satisfaction. I know I'm self-actualized to my, to my plan, if you will.
Exactly.
Yeah. So critical thinking, you have to have these bits and tools. And I know that's an onerous thing to ask sometimes because some people say they don't like math. Well, math's part of life. It really is. Some people say, I don't believe in psychology. Well, I want to tell you that psychology is a science. It's based on facts. It uses statistics, and you lose by throwing it out the door and saying, I don't trust it. So you need all these basic tool sets, and they're all represented on the website so that you can start with basic stuff and learn over time. You're not going to learn it right away, any of it. It takes time, it takes using it, but it's really going to help you be everything you want to be.
Exactly. And then just to resonate those concepts you mentioned, that can you name a few that from your point of view that they are the best examples of having great critical thinking skill set?
Okay, let me choose an example here that I like very much. It's called the Pareto rule, better known as the 80-20 rule. Okay. So if I sit down and I set a bunch of goals, if I set 10 goals, according to the Pareto rule, the top two most important goals are the ones I spend my time on. I don't spend my time on the other eight at all. This helps keep me focused, and it will always change. So there'll be another 10, and the two up here will change again. But the point is, with the Pareto rule and other things like that, I know when I'm doing well and I know when I'm getting off track. Okay. Like if I'm wasting time over here, I know I'm wasting time because something in my Pareto, two items, is suffering. It's suffering because I'm not doing it on schedule, or I haven't addressed a money issue, or whatever. But the point is, it helps me. So that's my tools help my critical thinking. We use Pareto rule, we use inflection points, we use the point of diminishing returns, things like that to help steer us to make good rational decisions. And there's a few people who might maintain that what happens in business has nothing to do with an individual. And I would argue the point that if you look at all the money business spends on doing the right thing, they have so many tools and they spend a ton of money doing it. They spend a ton of money training their employees to do it. You're passing up a great opportunity not to take advantage of all that money spent so that you understand what their thinking is and how that applies to your own life. It's free, in essence. Why wouldn't you do it?
Fascinating. And then if we were able to ask like advice, can you name a few like human names that from your or from your point of view that they are they're the excellent examples? Would you have a name for us?
Uh, you mean somebody that's living a fulfilled life that
And
we
then
all know?
exactly, and then have this excellent critical thinking skill set.
Well, I'm not into the popular culture so much, but let's just say everybody probably knows Oprah Winfrey, right?
Exactly.
Okay. I'm doing what Oprah Winfrey is doing, but just in a different way. But
Ah,
she brings on guests, she brings on authorities, experts, and exposes the public to them. She recommends books. She's basically doing the same thing I'm doing, or I'm copying her, whichever. I guess I'm copying her. So that's one person that most people will know. I have great admiration for a number of the scientists that have contributed to the life of the United States. Uh, Einstein wasn't a native,
right.
but he had a lot to do with what happened in this country, particularly around World War II. And people of his ilk, uh, then they rarely ever wind up wealthy. They rarely ever, you know, are around long enough to be recognized as the sages they are, but they have immensely impacted our lives. The things we take for granted every day, our cell phones, our routers, our TV, the cars that are essentially almost driving themselves, is all because somebody doing science, doing in a lab, is making all this stuff possible. And then
Exactly.
businesses put those into the cars or, do whatever to provide a value to you and me.
That is fascinating. And then James, that's so any final thoughts on your mind and heart that you like to share with our listeners?
Well, life can be a wonderful thing. You get out of it what you put into it. And I learned this. I'm kind of an existentialist, and in the 50s, the existentialist, one of the messages I really liked about them is we are our own salvation. They were saying religion's not, there's no government ever going to help us, da 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 da. It's up to us individuals. I think there's huge potential there for everybody to have a fine life and the very best that they can do. I wish them the best of luck with that. And we would love to have you visit the website, use whatever's there to help you in your search.
Marvelous. And that concludes our insightful conversation. And thank you, Jim, for sharing your incredible journey and valuable insights with us today. So it's been an absolute honor and having you on our show, and your insights have enlightened our mind and our hearts. And you know that your concepts of lifelong fulfillment has cultivated joys, happiness, and has brought vibrations of abundance, and definitely harmonized perfectly with the mission of our show. And thank you for being with us, Jim.
Good, good. Well, I thank you for having me on, and you have yourself a great week. Okay?
Thank you. And then also to our listeners, first of all, that if you like today's conversation and wanted to connect with Jim, that please go to www.lifelongfulfillment.com and to explore more. And Jim also have a podcast himself right here on the YouTube, and it's called a Vision in Action. And please listen and support Jim and great content out there. Secondly, that in summary, that we explored lifelong fulfillment and critical thinking today. So don't forget that pursuing of our dreams and attainment of true personal growth are within our reach, right? In the meantime, that don't forget that we are not Oprah Winfrey, and so we are ourselves, right? And improving that critical decision making is a continuous process that involves learning from experience and seeking diverse perspectives and staying informed, right? And we learned that from Jim that by developing these skills over time, that we can enhance our ability to make well-informed and effective decisions in both professional and personal contexts. So we are the architect of our own fulfillment. Jim, can I say that?
Yes, please.
And so stay tuned for more episodes where we continue to explore personal growth and personal development. Jim, again, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Until next time, take care. Bye
See
bye.
you, Tracy.
Take care. Bye bye.
Bye.